The trustees are hereby reconvening opening session at 5:30 p.m. Trustees to identify themselves by trustee area, Dr. William Mellinger, trustee area 1.
Dana Ridland, trustee area 2.
Sandy Gardner, trustee area 3.
Scott Crafton, trustee area 4. Julie Mizrahi, trustee area 5, running Springdale, Bear Lake, Green Valley Lake.
And we'll stand for our pledge of allegiance. And I am going to ask Dr. Bricker to lead us in that.
Okay. Hand on your heart. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 6:0 closed session report. Announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session, and there are no reportable actions from closed session. 7, public testimony. I have a public comment to read, and that is the only one, so there's no, I'm going to forgo the protocols if it's okay with the board. But
No, but I'm overridden.
you want me to read them even if there's not someone?
Oh, yeah, there's somebody. Oh, in public, yeah, it's written right there, so.
Okay.
Comment. Is that what I'm
We should
hearing?
probably have this conversation.
Have a written comment
Okay, I understand.
from Jamie Enderman, Valley of Enchantment Elementary School, kindergarten team, topic Tori Burke. I am hoping our words of support for Tori Burke will be heard by those who are making decisions regarding her tonight. Tori graciously stepped in to support the VOE Valley of Enchantment staff at a crucial time. Our morale was low, staff was frustrated with lack of consistent leadership, and we desperately needed a competent principal. Tori has been a breath of fresh air that has brought life back to Valley of Enchantment Elementary. Her organizational skills allowed her to step in and bring immediate positive change and unite us as a staff. Although we are sad she will not be continuing with us as our principal next year, we wish her the best and are thrilled that we get to keep her in our RIM family. Sincerely, the kindergarten team at Valley of Enchantment Elementary School, Jamie Enderman, kindergarten teacher. And there is no public testimony other than that written testimony. And there are no representatives from RIM Teachers Association or California School Employees Association. So we'll move on to, and there are no governing board or announcements to be made. So we move on to point 9, discussion information items that the board would like to discuss or information presented to the board. These items do not require board action. Number 1, storm debrief. Dr. Kimberly Fricker, Superintendent.
Thank you, President Mellinger. So I did an after action storm debrief for the public. We did have a superintendent's forum. Some of the information from this PowerPoint is directly from that presentation, but there are additions to it for the Board of Education to consider and things moving forward, especially as we look at advocacy in the aftermath of the storm and what we would want to do differently, or how that the current assembly bills or Senate bills have application or do not have application through the storm and what we can do differently for that. So I am going to start off. The purpose of the after action debrief was to hear from students, parents, and community members regarding the experiences everybody had with the storm and the district's response, the resulting county, state, and federal declaration of state of emergency in order to learn from those experiences and how to better prepare ourselves in the future. As our community went into the storm, our schools became evacuation centers. So one of the pictures depicts the rim of the World High School Library and how that was converted to barracks for the department, different department agencies. This one was for SoCal Gas. And then the gymnasium was in a similar fashion converted into an evacuation shelter that the Red Cross had held and took over for us and ran for the remainder of the storm. This is also similar to what the Charles Hoffman Elementary School looked like when that building, that facility became an evacuation center. And then the picture on the right is really how we welcomed students back that morning once school did reopen. There was a small video that came out from the county on the reopening of Rim Unified School District, which was very nicely done, and we did send that out. I think the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. That's kind of my motto that I live by. But we want today just to recap the storm, the district's response, the impact of that, and then future considerations. What I did go over in the superintendent's forum is just the phases of emergency operation. Phase one is really the time when crisis hits to when other help can mobilize. And when I did the report to the California Department of Education, I broke it apart into 3 different phases. One was that emergency operations response phase, that crisis phase, that critical intervention phase, and then moving into the recovery phase, and then moving into post-recovery or rebuilding phase. So this phase one really is about what all of the agencies were doing. And at this time, you really had the Rim Unified School District, County Sheriff's Department, was a prominent a part of that. Lieutenant Harris and I were in communication throughout the majority of every single day. And then County Fire with Captain Ibarra, who really kind of led up the fire department. And when California Fire came into the picture, those 2 agencies then worked together. The communication that really went out was inquiring as to where the assistance was needed, and then the communication to our county and to our state agencies for the request for a state of emergency to be called. Once the state of emergency was called, that's when you saw Cal Fire and County Fire on the scene. You also had CHP and County Sheriff, other agencies like the Red Cross, Emergency Response, the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center, was inactivated at that point. Caltrans and County Public Works were in joint effort, they were in effort to plow their different entities of the roadway structures. And then we had, of course, Southern California Edison as power was out, and then Southern California Gas to address the gas issues that we were experiencing around the mountain. Again, from the school district's point of view, we opened and operated evacuation shelters until we could be relieved, at least at Rim High School. All of our parking lots, most of our parking lots were utilized in some fashion for either supply delivery and or for staging of large equipment. The distribution centers for food, wood, and supplies were put in place in all of our school site locations, the majority of our school site locations. And then we also housed different agency workers from time to time. As many agency workers were coming up the mountain there, we did run out of space in local hotels and cabins and things of that nature to house all of the workers that were up on the mountain for the relief effort. So our buildings became resident shelters for them. And then a local assistance shelter. Once we went into the recovery phase of the storm, many of our school sites, our elementaries, were housed as local assistance shelters to give residents a contact of where they could get relief for the different areas of need that they had. And there was a whole host of tables set up with all different agencies to provide information and assistance to our residents. They are currently looking at the LGEC location, Lake Gregory here, most likely our boardroom and maybe our conference area to host additional resource agency centers here on an ongoing basis, at least through the summertime. So we are still we're working with business office to create those facility use agreements so that they can continue to use our buildings. The timeline really for the event, way back in February 22nd, which seems like light years away or ago. February 22nd is really when we went into school closure, and it kind of goes through the segments of week by week or 2 week segments where we went through the crisis all the way to where we actually reopened on March 20th. We did have a total of 21 days of school missed throughout the storm. And when we did come back from those 21 days, I know that educational services and student services did a great job at putting together social emotional plan, not only for our staff, but then training our staff to then put in a social emotional plan in every single classroom when the students came back for the students. We did have additional social emotional services in our designated areas. We had libraries designated as social emotional locations where students who were having difficulty did have or experience trauma through the event. They could go and get resources dedicated to them. And that was provided by Rim Family Therapists and Mountain Counseling. So I think that Mr. Hansen and Ms. Mingus and their team did an impeccable job at putting that together on both behalf of our staff who needed assistance, but also our students. If there's ongoing concerns with students, we continue to provide support services to them. And then we also had a layered or tiered approach to students and families who were actually either displaced, partially displaced, and in some case, one is permanently displaced. So we don't always get to know or decide where an insurance company may put a displaced family. We do have families that are, as far as Riverside County, that are displaced in other counties other than our own, but we still have to provide educational services for them. So we do have a tiered approach where they can have had short-term independent study. If you were only gone for about 2 weeks, you could have had a long-term independent study approach if you were gone for up to a month. And then we have obviously the transition to RIM Virtual Academy if you were going to be gone for a longer stay than that. We do have some families, especially seniors, who wanted to stay and graduate from RIM, and it was really important for them to do that. So we did want to make sure that they could have these educational services and then still be able to graduate with their class. We held all of their, we worked with teachers to make sure that grades were not impacted by the closure, given that we were gone for so long, and that we could hold all of the graduation and end of school year activities on the same days that they were still originally planned, so that there was no additional turmoil or disruption for our families for the remainder of the school year. But we do know that moving forward, the learning loss is an issue, and it will be a concern that we would have to face and put in intervention for the upcoming about 2 years at this time. We're going to plan out 2 years, and then we're going to see and assess what that looks like at a later date. When we talk about just a recap of the school district and a summary, there was a lot of advocacy that both the board president and myself took on throughout the storm with local and state representatives to make sure that we advocated for the needs of our mountain communities. And that would include the requests in writing for state of emergencies to be called both at the county level and at the state level. And then when in the midst of the storm, what resources we needed to have on the mountain and how quickly we could create a situation where those resources could get on the mountain. So I do appreciate Board President Mellinger for helping in assisting that advocacy effort. The superintendent myself was designated an acting partner, so I was on the tactical team that navigated through the storm. And again, some of our parking lots, all of the outline of our parking lots, our school site, maintenance and operation, all of those things identify what our school effort was in not only getting our school district back up and running, but also aid in assisting to the community. I do want to thank maintenance operation for, and Jen K-Well is not here, but also transportation for their impeccable job. They worked together to get students transported off the mountain early in the storm. Otherwise, those students, as we now know, would have been here for like 2 weeks instead of just a couple of days that they had to spend until we could get our buses mobilized and take the students down the mountain. Our school buses were used to bring supplies up the mountain as well. And then I know that maintenance and operation did a great job at building inspections and coordinating building inspections to make sure that our classrooms and our buildings were safe for students and staff to return, both within their own employees and then in working with the county when the county state instructional inspectors came through and every building was inspected. So they did adequately remove snow removal for us, which was mountains of snow, but they are a mighty fleet. So many thanks to maintenance operations and the transportation team. Jim says happily. So we did do surveys, and throughout the storm, as we were looking at reopening, I know that came out of Mr. Hansen's office, to our families. Some of the things some of the criteria that were kind of accumulated were the year-end activities. We know that our parents had the greatest concern about our year-end activities, and are we holding graduation? Are we holding those dates? And they needed to know to adjust, obviously, families coming in or family coming to attend the graduations, and we are trying to hoping to hold those dates firm. We have sent in the waiver to the county office of ed, which has been approved, and now it is on to the state level. So we're just waiting to see if the state approves the waiver, and then we will make that publication once we get that information. The purple square is parents, the blue square is students, and the green square is community. So you can see how the community ranks some of these criteria from the survey. Grades, students had the most angst about grades and what is it going to look like, and can I still graduate, and what does this mean? And so we try to address that both at all of the school site levels, especially the high school level. I know that the communications up from the high school to their community has been really good. And so I think the families feel very supported in that effort. I just want to thank RTA and our teachers for really working with our students and making those accommodations, given a very difficult situation, to go back and review some of the material once they did come back before they started moving forward. And so alleviating some of those concerns from especially the students, that was their primary concern. The services provided by the district across the board, the scale was only out of 5. But across the board, everyone seemed pretty, happy by the support of the district or the services rendered by the district. The students, really probably weren't impacted as greatly as the parents and the community members. And then finally, the superintendent's message, both on the parents and the students and the community side, we got very positive comments about the messaging that went out throughout the storm from the district at large. So. When we did have the superintendent's forum, the most emphasis that we created was really what worked well, what were concerns, and then what would we need to improve in the future. Because if we do want to amend our processes or be much more effective, that information is critically important for us to factor in. So what worked well, again, was the messaging, some of the immediacy of the response of the district, and then the use of the public schools or our buildings to aid in the public need. The concerns, which is a lag time between when the crisis happens and then the response can mobilize. Lost instructional time for students, we know that is large, and the learning loss that comes with that. So the ed services and student services team is really going to be working now throughout the summer to build plans to put in those interventions that are going to address learning loss and hopefully shore some of that learning loss up. We know that that's probably going to be at least a year or 2-year process. So we're building for that. The needs are improvement, just that immediacy of response, identification of needs, difficulty of getting equipment and supplies like food up the mountain, and then unified community effort with one point of contact. So it was on the mountain and off the mountain. There was a unified team, the EOC off the mountain. And so between the sheriff's department, the fire department, myself, we were kind of this triangulation, which I hear comes out of the old fire, where you have a unified command on the top. So. Areas, and this is really where I want the board to have discussion as to how to move forward, or if we do move forward at all, on areas where we could we have a greater advocacy voice. In my report, it was about 22 pages long that went to the CDE on accounting for the 21 days that we were out of school, and then accounting for the district's response. But also in there, I took the liberty of doing some advocacy on some things that would have been helpful through the storm. One of the issues is the transportation bill, extending the language to include all schools with either an equal percentage of funding, to cover the compulsory ed requirement for transportation, especially in rural schools. We have a heavier or a great degree of reliance on our busing to get students to and from school. Currently, the Assembly Bill 181 does not benefit our district by way of additional funds. And so we feel like that's an area where we would want to make that known to the state and to see if we would want to do something to see if that could go in a different direction that would actually benefit RIM. The second school policy would be school buildings to be considered federal state infrastructure, subject to upgrade, maintenance, safety regulations, intruder safeguards, and climate controlled environments. This one became very important to me. I know that there's a study for climate, California climate targeted approach that reaches carbon neutrality by 2040. And so Stanford is really doing a lot of work. One of the major areas of, I'm going to use the word infrastructure, that are still using, fossil fuels or burning of fossil fuels to heat buildings is schools across the state of California. They are very well aware that school budgets do not include any considerable amount of money to upgrade our infrastructures in the way and maintain our infrastructures in the way that they need to be made. So that is an area where that conjoined effort with a substantial, group could possibly push this idea forward. And having our buildings actually, considered infrastructure that would have a dedicated stream of budgets to maintain them. For us, the reason it's so important is that RIM High School in the first 4 days of the storm, when it was an evacuation center, was running on our backup generator. And so without that, we wouldn't have been able to open up the school. At first, LGEC was opened up as an evacuation center, and the Red Cross wouldn't support us in that effort because we don't have a generator here. So should the power go out, you're going to be evacuating evacuees. So that is a difficulty in a storm situation you don't want to get into. All of our buildings should have effective generators, and all of our buildings should have up-to-date electrical structures and panels. They should all have HVAC units that can climate control and filter the air inside of the building environments. And without that, in a storm, we can get by. In a fire, we can't. Because if you can't go outside because of the air quality control, you only can come into internal spaces. And if we can't come in climate controlled, air filtered spaces, then you can't have evacuation centers, because we're not in some cases able to open up even the windows. And in a fire, you wouldn't be able to open up your windows, even to climate control the inside of your buildings. And so we would be in a situation where if we did have to evacuate the mountain, you would be having to evacuate the majority of the mountain. Should the air quality be as such, you cannot be outside, or you can't get into air conditioned spaces large enough to house the public. So that is a considerable threat to us and a concern for us. More importantly, if there was an earthquake, and earthquakes often come with fires, and our roads are severed like they were in the storm, where you couldn't get up and down the mountain, that would put us in a more perilous position. So for me, this one becomes a very large concern, especially for our mountain communities. And all three of the big three mountain communities are very distinct and different. And I know the difficulty of even trying to get in this storm from Lake Arrowhead to Running Springs, and you could not get there. There was no way to get there. If we didn't have administration on that side of the mountain and we couldn't open up the PhD, there was really nowhere for those residents to go. And that shelter saw more residents, evacuees, than RIM High School did. And so this is one that I think as a Board of Education and as a district staff, if we want to do some advocacy, I would love to entertain the idea of talking about this a little bit further. I know that it shares, some of your passions are along the same line. So as soon as I'm done in a second, I will open that for a little bit of discussion. I'm sorry. On the community side, the plowing of non-county roads is something that I think we should have further discussions on with the city, or with the county and with county public works. We do have students living on Mound County roads, and those students can't get to school, should be called snow day, let alone a blizzard day, but they can't get to school. If we don't call a snow day, and it's okay for everyone else to get out and get to the schools, the school sites, and our buses can run. On those days, some of those students, have to call a snow day, their parents have to call themselves a snow day because they can't get out of their non-county road. And so those students are at a disproportion to receive less education just by proxy of where they live. But we are still under the compulsory education laws, which require students to come to and from school. We, the school district, have no way to get them there. And that puts the district in a negative position with some of those students, and some of those students are the ones that we really want. Also Family Child Services to address food insecurity, home displacement and access to services. I just want to thank Mr. Hansen. He not only, it was very important to call every single staff member through the storm so that I understood who needs help, who's okay, who's not okay, who needs what. And just to show our staff that we care and that they are extremely valued to us. But not only that, Mr. Hansen and his team also called our students who we could have reason to believe were in peril of some sort, so that we could provide services to them and get them into as safe a space and access to educational services as quickly as we possibly could once we opened. And then moving forward to item 3 under policy and advocacy, Assembly Bill 140. If you remember from the COVID closures, Assembly Bill 140 became paramount as it waived the educational minutes. And it also allowed us to use alternative education code to open up independent study and allow our students to go into distance learning. So in a situation where we have a single district's school closure for an extended period of time, we as an LEA, as a local education agency, we have no ability of our own volition to go into distance learning platform without a governor's waiver from his seat. And so if we do have a fire and it is not a state of emergency where people are at risk of safety, we could go into a state where we could have distance learning again. However, we as an agency are not able to just pull the plug and make the decision to do that. And so not all school districts are in the exact situation, but all school districts could be subject to, fire that could have inclement air quality or cause disruption where they could not come to school. So this would be something that we would want to revisit in some way, shape. We could extend or re-envision Assembly Bill 140, which would allow the permission to go to online learning as an entire district. And so a lot of families have asked me, well, why didn't we go back to distance learning? One, we couldn't, we don't have the authority to do so. And 2, it's a little bit different in our snowstorm because we were in a state of crisis, we were in a state of emergency where either staff members were threatened, homes were threatened, families were threatened, we didn't know who was who. And so work had shut down at that point. When you go back into the response phase, we may have had an opportunity in those last couple of days or a week to go into a distance learning situation. However, we don't have the ability or the authority to do so. So that was one of the areas where I think that, it would behoove us to have some sort of ability. And then again, I mentioned the submission of the school closure report that went up to the state representatives and the state of California Department of Education. So at that time, it's really the end of my presentation on the synopsis of the storm and the aftermath, but the conversation here is really going into advocacy of if there's something that we would want to change about the way that the school district responded, how we could do that better. Or if there are comments, questions on these advocacy points, or if there's additional points of advocacy that the board has on their mind or is thinking about, or wants thoughts to consider for us as a district team to bring back.
Somebody want to speak first, or should I go ahead? Well, first, a couple of things. Thanks again, Kim, for all the work that you did and for all the work that our staff, and that we're so appreciative that our school district could be such an important part of this community. And think that's the role of the school district. On a couple of things, one on the Assembly Bill 140 alternative education. When we have to have Chromebooks in students' hands as well as internet access.
We do have to have Chromebooks or some sort of device in a student's hand, and yes, we do have to have access. In the state of emergencies where we don't have power and we don't have satellite cellular structures, it's very, very difficult. In the case of a fire, we may not have those things out, so in a fire, we most likely would have gone or would go into online learning. And we would have to have education services deploy those devices. Much like we did with COVID, and or have a system where the students take them home. But we do have that number of devices, we do have one for every student.
They just don't take them home
They
though,
just don't take them home.
unless we're anticipating this blizzard to come and
And in those cases, since they are in the classrooms, we could say, take these home in your backpack tonight, we are not sure. Right, at least the students would have them.
And then the challenge along with that was, we didn't
Don't
even
have a
know,
heart
could
attack,
we,
Mark, don't have to come back, Mark, come back.
we don't even know that we could have communicated with our teachers.
Not in a state of emergency where it is a crisis situation. So in those situations, you don't go into online learning. But if we have like a fire where we are near it, it's far enough away, it's not threatening our areas, but the air quality is something, by the way, the wind is blowing, that we can't have school. We could have a situation where we call school for fire. The other area that we talked not so long ago, back in August, if you remember, one of the questions at the board table was, when do you call a hot day? Like not a snow day, but it's too hot because the internal temperatures inside of your classrooms are such that it's not conducive to have students in those buildings. That would be our situation. We know as a Board of Education, we are trying to address that situation differently, but there's going to be a considerable amount, even if we do have a measure and that measure passes, there's a considerable amount of time, years, right, Jenny? Before any of that work would happen. So theoretically, we could have days where the internal temperature of classrooms are so hot, we couldn't have school.
So I'm just thinking that there would have to be some protocols put in place because, so yes, we heard blizzard. Yes, we knew it was going to be heavy. We didn't know that we would be out 21 days.
Correct.
And so just trying to anticipate that, it sounds like a challenge, but it would seem like advocacy needs to continue on getting internet access across the community where it's limited in still places across the state. And there are some bills up about internet access too. Cindy, you wanted to add on that?
That was one of our talking points, and specifically my talking point that I was given was the broadband and cybersecurity. So that conversation did happen with Representative Jay O'Nulty. I'm sick of this house, but yeah, that was one of the talking points in the federal platform.
So that continues to be a concern. I also had a question I just have to ask on the behalf of a couple of former students from RIM who said, when we had too many snow days, we always had to go back to school after the June date for graduation. So it continued. So why aren't we doing that this year?
Did anyone answer?
Want me to answer that one?
Yes.
When I was at RIM, we did build in the snow days, and if we had snow days, we went, and so you never really knew when graduation was. I wasn't sure, Scott, if that was the way when you were in school too. So we didn't build snow days in, and then we would have to just have them to the end of the year. So, I mean, we made a decision to go for a waiver, with the board to not have to, add those days back. So, I mean, that was a cabinet and board decision not to add those days back and to apply for the waiver. That's why we're not doing that. So we could have made a different decision and not applied for a waiver and added those days back. But I think too, this was an emergency condition. It wasn't just 1 or 2 more snow days. I think we probably would have had different conversations if we were 1 over 2 over, was there a non-attendance day we could swap in or something like that. So, but the gravity of it was such that People are ready for summer, they're ready for spring. And if the waiver process is available, safety nets for ELP and summer programs to starting to address learning loss. We're consciously making efforts for that. So that's why we make the decision to not continue the school year.
And we do build those days in. We build in how many days?
6.
We built in 6. What we don't have yet is for next year. Is that we have to build in our 5-year average if we want to have an opportunity to apply for a waiver. So it behooves us to always build in that average of 5 years. With the fire, we excluded those emergency days from our 5-year average. And right now I don't have that question answered on because this will really mess up our 5-year average and have to redo the calendar and there's negotiation impacts and all that. I'm anticipating the answer is going to be yes, exclude the days that you're under, the federal emergency. So from the calculation of I'm assuming that's going to be the answer, but I don't have it in writing yet.
I'll continue unless someone else wants to jump in. Okay. Could you look back my recollection is that some of the statistics when you've tried to continue days after school was supposed to be out, that attendance went significantly down. I don't want that just to be a feeling that I'm assuming, but wasn't there some information to that end as well?
Are you asking me?
Neither one of you.
So I don't have that. I didn't know that question was going to be answered. But we could, I think there was in my memory, that we added a day back in our recent history. So from memory, yes, very few people could get it down. And there's an attendance issue on not only staff but students. I don't have that data exactly with me, but yes, from memory, those of us who are living it, yes, there was lots of extra stuff to have to do because it really wasn't conducive to
Right. I want to talk about the roads, but before I do that, I need to ask what happens if for some reason the governor's office declines our request. I need to be thinking ahead, sorry.
Then we would add days.
Then we would add.
So we would have to add days back on to the end of the calendar. And even when we talked about that as a cabinet, and with the high school leadership team, we feel that regardless if we have to add days back on, we are gonna hold graduation where it currently resides. And so I don't think that those seniors need to have a more of an altered, senior year, spring of their senior year, which is the most stressful part of their senior year. We did, as a cabinet team, agree that we would hold the graduation date regardless, and then we would decide how many days we would end up having to add on to the end of the school year.
All right, and then switching gears to the non-county roads. Are you speaking of roads that are special districts, non-maintained drives, or do you know what you're actually referring to when you say that?
Well, I would love to have a conversation with the county to see which roads are feasible for them to plow if they are non-maintained county roads. That those are the roads that are currently not plowed or maintained in any capacity by our county. And to see where those would look, where those would be, and then how would we get them plowed or get them cleared in a timely fashion for students to be able to get out and then get to school. We do know and have heard throughout the year that some of the families on days we did not call snow days, some of the families, especially in Arrow Bear, Green Valley Lake and Running Springs, they cannot get to school whenever there is a certain amount of snow on the ground. And obviously those areas, the higher elevations get more snow than we do down here, that they cannot get to school on those days. And so those students miss a disproportional amount of snow days as opposed to other students because the parents can't get them out either. So those would be the ones that would be considered in talking to the county about.
How can we find out what those roads are?
I think we have to talk to County Public Works to see, now that they have a grid and a map of all of the roads, to see one, where our students are located, and two, what are those roads that are most critical to us? And in some conjoined effort of, if we plow to here, can you get to here so that we can then drive from there, to get them to school?
And there, I will caution us, there are those special district roads. There are areas where people have chosen not to pay the taxes to have their road cleared. So we have to be careful with that. Yes, Jordan?
I was just going to mention that there is a GIS map that illustrates unmaintained county roads.
And Scott?
Many of the roads that aren't maintained are access roads that split lots but more importantly than that, the county has certain priorities that they do, and sometimes it's just communicating with them saying, hey, our students can make it to here. We need to make it a priority for you to get the plow to here first. Because they have a certain route that they do and things that they do a priority over other stuff. But if we can work with that agency to make sure that they can at least get to a certain point, then kids can know that that's going to become the pickup spot. And that would help alleviate the problem a lot.
And I do know that Dr. Fricker was very helpful in working with the county to try to request places to be plowed on our behalf. Other comments or questions?
In general?
Go.
Oh. No, just in terms of, for starters, for the roads, I think that, I mean, there's a number of things in here that I'm really happy to see these written down in terms, and it'd be helpful, I'm sure, for us to prioritize where we want to put our energy and start developing a plan, make sure we're all on step with this. Getting back to the roads, I imagine what I think would be helpful is not necessarily getting into the how, but definitely being able to communicate the what in terms of mapping where our students are currently located and interlaying with that, which roads are plowed and which roads aren't plowed. And definitely from an equity standpoint and, compulsory education availability, being able to provide a picture of where we're missing that plowing, being able to really actually have that graphic. So, I'm sure that would be doable, maybe even without any expense to the district, to put together that picture so that we could use that to communicate. So that's in terms of transportation. I think that's critical in terms of first us getting our own ducks in a row and being able to communicate the problem. But I imagine it's not a commonly found problem down the hill, so that's probably something that isn't even on their radar. So being able to clearly communicate, this is what we're dealing with, and this is on a regular basis. This isn't us waiting until the next snow we get in to see. This is going to be happening next year, hopefully not next month. But being able to have that explained, and to Scott's point, possibly even on the short term, helping to reprioritize or reschedule when things are happening. So our high school students' roads might be plowed prior to our middle school students' roads being plowed if everything else is being equal. So helping to develop that communication. So like I said, there's a lot here. I understand from talking with Kim the other day with the transportation bill, Assembly Bill 181, that we're one of 3 districts in the state who do not benefit from this bill.
Oh, county, one of 3 in the county.
Oh, it's in the county. Okay, one of 3. So even still, how many school districts are there? 40 some or?
33.
Yeah, 33. Just so to be able to, again, they're probably looking at who they're benefiting, but being able to communicate who's being left out and what the impact is and why we're being left out, and the lack of decency in having it being structured that way. So, and then the third thing, actually, that I wanted to,
Are you going to switch subjects?
yeah, so I'll hold off on
Just a
that.
second. So go ahead, Cindy, because you've done a lot of work on transportation for us.
So in a meeting on during the AEC convention, I went to the small schools meeting, even though we're technically not there yet, Jenny. We don't want to be there, but I went there anyways. And we did discuss this bill. I specifically brought it up because that was a concern. There are other districts that are considered rural and have some of the same issues. Dennis Meyer took notes on that. Unfortunately, the state legislation feels, as Dennis says, they're patting themselves on their back for addressing transportation and giving money, even though CSBA was advocating for 100%. What the legislation gave at 60%, they're pretty happy with, and there's no further conversation being had to increase it to 100%. It doesn't really have teeth right now. So all we can do is maybe develop a almost like a position paper in terms of advocating to 100%, and we can start that conversation. If we put this argument in writing and submit it to Senator Ochoa Bogue and Assemblymember Lackey, and then I can submit it to Dennis, because he did like our transportation position, our late start bill position paper. So we can do that advocacy work, but I'm just advising you that there's not really the will of the legislators to really put it 100%. They think they did awesome.
Which it would be helpful to also know, not just our need, like to talk about Cindy and communicating with them, maybe a position paper from the district, but to even communicate with all of those other districts that are in the same position we are and get them to join in communicating, because we're all small.
I can email Dennis to ask him if he knows which districts are not benefiting this bill, to see if they've taken a pulse. So I can email him this weekend. See, I think he's back in town this weekend.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, Jordana, do you have any switch to a different topic part of it?
To me, the biggest, I mean, all of these are important. The biggest one that would be really huge to really take on is one listed under number 2, the school buildings being considered the federal state infrastructure subject to upgrade, maintenance, safety, etc. When you think about it, and again, this has been mentioned before, I know Kim has talked about it, that state buildings, state-run buildings that, you know, where our state officials are doing business are definitely in a much different condition than our school district buildings, and they have a different standard. So our students, our staff deserve to be in a safe, secure, healthy environment. So I don't think that's part of the thinking right now. The thinking is that we receive what money we receive, and through our funding, we need to parcel out what we have that isn't sufficient and somehow make sure we're doing an excellent job of teaching students. But frankly, one of the things that we've learned over time is the environment becomes incredibly important. Climate is definitely part of one of the variables we really have to contend with, as along with just a lot of different things. So being able to somehow, I think as a group, I'd like to really focus on, this wouldn't be something that would be easy to take on, but start looking at ways that we can communicate our story. Take videos, the videos of what we've seen in past months, years of what's happening on our campuses, physically, the infrastructure, and somehow be able to start communicating that and explain that it really is, it's cost, just it's punishing, but we have to deal with and communicate that.
All right, anything from anyone else?
I just wanted to comment really quickly on the Zoom part of it, because I think that's a big aspect. And then if we can get some kind of habit of doing that, just alone to have the communication with the kids. Because the kids can identify themselves whether they need a Chromebook or not, whether they have internet access, things like that. But if we can get in the habit of that, then it's not going to be such a big task when we anticipate something as well.
I appreciate also, Dr. Fricker, that you were pointing out the dangers of what could happen in an earthquake, where we could be an island for a much longer time, and we would have lots of resources we would not have. We're talking about all kinds of things about power that could be damaged and would require much more assistance. And it would require even more of what the community did during this event when people were helping neighbors, which again, I just want to continue to praise. It was all across the mountain, people were helping each other. I also want to remind us that actually there are 2 other meetings happening right now. One is the County Storm Response Committee, of which yours truly was a member of that committee. So I presented all of the different things that you put in your report. And one of those items I talked to the county about was, county, why can't you come up maybe with some funds to help with some of the building kinds of needs that we have? We're starting that process already. But that committee report started at 5 o'clock tonight. I'm sure it's probably over by now. At 6 p.m. tonight, if somebody's watching online, you should still go over there. FEMA is having their community meeting at the San Moritz Lodge. And that began at 6 p.m. because we are now recognized as a disaster community. And so there are loans and grants available and other resources. And I think that's what you were referring to when they're requesting the possibility of using some spaces here. But there's some, FEMA will be in town for sure for the next couple of weeks or longer. But they're actually starting an office up at the Twin Peaks Community Center. So there are options, and which leads me to a question. Are there any resources that we qualify with FEMA? And if no, Jenny? You naysayer.
How the emergency declaration was stated is funding has not been opened up for anything we would qualify for to claim.
Okay.
So, and that's on the state and federal level. But we passed last board meeting, we did pass the resolution and declare the emergency ourselves. So that because like with COVID, the FEMA backdated opportunities for funding. They also took away opportunities for funding when they were like, we'll pay for this, but then they go back and say, okay, we won't pay for all of it. So, but they do through COVID had retroactively opened windows up at, after the fact. So we will be able to participate if that does happen.
Thank you very much. And I should also mention that on May 3rd is the combined MAC meeting in which several of the government agencies will be represented. And that is a community meeting, and that is taking place in our at our theater at Rim of the World High School. All right, anything else?
I was going to say, in terms of the ability to create a trigger that will allow us to move from brick and mortar education to the distance learning. I think that what we could do is go ahead and schedule a meeting with Senator Chilabo's office to have a conversation on what does this mean. She's the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee, and we can tell her our situation, and especially applicable if we're beginning of the 2003, 2007 fires were evacuated for several weeks, but the kids could obviously transition to online very easily because most of them would probably have access to internet. So I think what we should do, in my opinion, is ask for a meeting with her and her staff to begin a conversation of how this could look as a bill, as amended, and maybe maybe it becomes a new bill, not amending Bill 140, but actually becoming a new bill, because it is a brand new concept. And in having a discussion of what those triggers would be and who would make sure those triggers were real and not just made up by your district. Maybe that is just a checkpoint with the district because they're closest to the situation and they confirm, yes, that district is in crisis, it's been evacuated, whatever. And so we could have that discussion of a new bill, what are the triggers to move from one place to another, one from brick and mortar to. So that would be my suggestion, is just go ahead and let's get a meeting.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Cindy. And Senator Ochoa Vogt is an education advocate. She's a member of the Education Committee. And has already given us an invitation to talk with her. So,
She thought I was a school board member from Caiaphas. So
yes. Is it ever appropriate to invite a senator to come to a board?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can invite her up here. Or we can go to her office to hold the initial meeting. And have the conversation. Lay the groundwork on that and see where that initial conversation takes us.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want me to set that up?
Oh,
Okay,
you or I, either one of us.
you can do it if you want, I don't care. I really don't.
I'd be
I
glad.
second it.
Let's both meet with her.
There you go.
Okay. So,
We could all meet together. We would just agendize it with the location if we choose to do that.
and that was part of why I was even, maybe we invite her up here.
Well, we can agendize it as being the meeting that we're meeting
At
with
her
her
office.
her office, because we can do that when we do facility tours. We did that when we did the whole thing with Paul at Brim High. It became, we just got the meeting agenda of what it was, when it was gonna start, and then there you go.
Well, I urge us to try to make that happen.
All right, and you set the meeting and we'll be there.
Dana?
I also would like to see if as a group, we could, Cindy suggested us maybe developing a position paper. So,
I've done that. We can do that. It's Bill's gonna. I did that before. And that, developed that with, Jen, with, oh my God, I'm tired, Jenny.
You were thinking of all the gems.
I was
You
thinking,
started to
oh
say
my
K-Well,
gosh.
but it was, Jim K-Well, myself and others that helped that.
Exactly, we
Yeah.
sat down and figured it out, took several hours.
what I'm thinking might be a good idea, you had mentioned, emailing to find out what other small school districts are facing the same issues we are. So possibly just kind of be more systematic about this, gather some information with the intention of, either us, you and Jenny, or maybe more of us involved, developing a position paper, but possibly first, yeah, no, that's perfect, but just thinking that creating some structure around this so we can gain some traction, at least on our end, in asking for help.
Okay, we are going to move on to the next item, and that is the bond discussion update. Dr. Kimberly Fricker, Superintendent.
So, just a couple updates on the bond, it's a tentative bond initiative. So you have charged us with, and there are these flyers in the back as well, for the community. But you charged us with just preparing documentation, preparing all of the steps needed to effectively, advise the board what it would take to get a bond measure or to put a bond measure on the ballot. And then kind of where do we go from here? The one topic that came up for a future discussion was how do we tell our story? And so let me just walk you through some things that we have done thus far. If you look at the timeline, the event timeline on the back of the sheet that I had just passed out, and again, there's some on the back circulation table. The board has given us direction in the timeframe of March, January through March. We have approved the consultant to conduct a feasibility study. We had already done that. And so our team, the district leadership team, has met with True North, who is going to conduct the feasibility study to put together the initial survey that will go out to residents to try to get a voter demographic or a picture landscape preview of what the voter demographic most likely is in favor, not in favor, and where they stand on the consideration of a bond. And then we know that if we do go for a bond, that there's a time period where we have to use campaign raised funds. We cannot use state and federal funds. So we do know that that process will need to begin, or we need to conceptualize the beginning of that process. So since we've gone through January and March, we have been hit by a massive storm. I don't know if anybody knows, which has derailed a couple of efforts. But Jenny, do you want to just discuss the True North survey? And I do believe that either if you don't have the True North final survey, it will be up in your board. Oh, yeah, you do have,
Yeah,
Okay.
I need copies.
sorry, so
Oh, that's okay, I forgot that. That was a couple days ago, you can't remember everything.
they all blend.
Yeah, they do all blend.
Okay, I'm gonna let you talk about the survey and your work.
Okay. So we had a Zoom on Monday with True North, Dr. the Florney, and we reviewed the survey questions. And he went back to the prior survey and he kind of looked to see how they tested and to see and did some comparison. He also took the survey questions in the initial part of the bond and he compared them to our final bond statement that went out to voters. And there was changes from what we did test and then what our final bond language. And so he did share that will I don't know, to be honest, I have no memory of that conversation or was there a specific item that we were told to change in our final ballot language, but he did say that when he went back to it, there was some differences between what we tested and what we put out to voters. So, but I didn't know that, and so we'll, just maybe that's a thought about moving forward to make sure there is that communication when we get a year from now. So because if things have changed, different players in the mix, circle back to, well, what did we test and what was successful on? So as a group, as a cabinet, and then with Adam and Jason from our financial advisor and the survey, we went through these questions and we had questions. We had questions, okay, what does that mean? And how would that test? He explained the process on, why you start with certain questions first, and why you give certain detail first and maybe, either less or more detail after. Because as someone's completing a survey, once you have positions out, then you re-ask the questions. Because maybe after they've heard things like air conditioning, roofs, things like that, would their position have changed? So there's repetitiveness in these questions because of the testing of the position, depending on the yes or no's. And then, being able to circle back, say, okay, well, now that you've heard all this, how has your position changed? Yes or no? So, in addition, and we can pass these out too, and we just need to give an okay. I didn't say one because it was like, we were writing in here and I was getting escrows work done, but these were happy. I'll pass them out to you, but it will come from Dr. Berger on, hey, families are getting a survey. I mean, he wrote that script. We didn't need to okay it to see if we're okay, because it really needs to come from us, not because people will not, if it comes with, True North has a survey. It's not going to have to wait as in, the district administration team has a survey for you to complete, and because it is a lengthy survey. He talked about how we pull the samples of the not just the registered voters, but the voters who are most likely to vote. So not because and they go back because they get the data from the registrar's office on the voting history of the group. And who's likely to vote, because as they pick their sample, let's say I'm in the sample and I don't participate in that, they can replace me with a like demographic of me. You know, not just another random person, because they want to be able to not taint the sample pool by then, by replacing people who aren't participating with maybe this whole other group. So the likely voters of the registered voters, and then the demographics within that. And I thought it was actually interesting, because we talked to girls before the board meeting, Republican, Democrat, Independent. Is it a two-party household with the same party affiliation? Is it a mixed household? Because of, so it was interesting. I mean, I like that kind of discussion. I think it's fun. So, so it gave us the idea of kind of what who's going to be answering this. And so, he'll get, and in the back of it is part of the sample, of the demographics of how they pull it. So. I have allergies, so I feel like I'm losing my voice today, but I feel okay.
Good.
Yeah. I also, and we've given this before, I wasn't really sure what we would talk about. We have this, we passed out when we went for Measure A, we had 2 sample timelines. If we were to go to a March ballot or a November ballot, we've had these at a meeting before, but we did make more copies, so you can have them at the ready if you like. And just what's the sample timelines would be.
Awesome.
Okay, so we can pass that out. But
And is that different from this, do you know, Jeremy?
this was from Measure A, so.
So what I did is I took the timeline from Measure A, I just plotted it out independently into, does everybody have this?
Yes.
So I plotted it out on the event timeline on the back of this document. I plotted out what would be Measure A onto a sample month time frame, getting us from phase 1 all the way down to phase 8, which would be November 2024 election time.
And we would, as we start doing the work, especially after the survey results are done, Adam Bauer, who you spoke with before, his team will start coming up either Zoom or in person and start revising. We'll get bond counsel in place, an underwriter, and as you compile that team before it's a campaign, and so we'll look at projected board dates that we have for the 2023 school year. We'll have to have some placeholders for 2024, even though you vote on that in December, on what, because we'll have to backwards map from board meetings too, because there'll be resolutions to pass information to get out. And so that kind of work.
So what you have in front of you, so first of all, I can turn to the front side. I just measured out, the depiction is just the goal of what I mentioned earlier before, carbon neutral school building portfolio by 2024, which is kind of a goal or a lofty goal by the state of California. So we want to keep that in mind and just at the forefront of what we're doing, especially if we talk about master facility planning, facility upgrade, what to consider, what not. It could be a factor that we want to definitely put inside of our school buildings. Just be environmentally conscious. I was a science teacher before, so that's like near and dear to my heart. But when we started talking, we haven't started talking about telling our story. But when I wanted to give you some information about how we go about telling our story, I always feel like we should come to the table with information and not start from ground zero. So I do think that we need an envisioning statement for RIM. And this doesn't have to be the envisioning statement, but I do think it is important for us to be aligned on a vision or what we would like to see for the future of our district, some district focus. I know that here I have curriculum integration, which is something that we would want to accomplish, community resource, because our buildings are up and available to our community in a variety of ways, whether that should be from facility use, rec and park. And we have some other organizations that use our buildings to service the greater part of our community, but then also campus safety and campus upgrades. So that's a need for us. I think that we have to start honing in on some of the things that the bond measure would cover. Here are just examples. It's probably just an initial draft, not a final review. But we have to kind of conceptualize what that bond measure will cover, obviously. And then just going back to the congruence that Jenny mentioned, when we were on the conversation with True North, being congruent to how we start out in what we are going to cover with the bond, and then actually what we are going to go out for in that final phase of the bond, and making sure that those communications, those initiatives are congruent throughout the entire process. And so I wasn't aware, but True North, who's the gentleman? Dr. McClerney did say that there was some incongruence last time with the last bond measure. So I think that it's caution for concern. We want to be careful about that. The purpose on the front part, again, just example for your review, not necessarily the end product. On the back, just the process of what the board goes through. They give directives. We have to prepare outlines for the measure, the feasibility study, master facility planning, financial consultant study, community impact study, bond scope and priority initiative when we finally decide, community surveys that do go out periodically, this True North survey being the first, campaign fundraising, campaign consultant, to make sure that we adhere to campaign guidelines. That's very important. That's not any of our level of expertise, so we don't want to violate any of those. Community forums that we would hold periodically throughout, we can have as many as we would like, but they should be poignant and strategic. Marketing campaigns that need to happen throughout, and then the tax rate resolution that needs to be approved by the board in order to inactivate the bond on a measure. Some of the external supports that we have identified so far, and then some are to be determined, obviously. True North is our feasibility study consultant. Fieldman, Roll Up and Associates is our financial advisor. We have not picked a master facility plan consultant, although you have gone out to video two interviews next week. We have two potential companies that could satisfy that. In the interview process, we will then bring to the board our recommendation for who could do the master facility plan. Bond consultant campaign, by the bond campaign consultant is not yet to be determined. A survey consultant not yet to be determined, and that would be the analysis of the surveys. If we do multiple, True North does our first. They don't do any more than this, correct?
We didn't ask them to. I don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
We
and then
didn't ask them.
we have bond counsel. That would be a layer on top of that. I'm sorry. I don't know what other surveys that True North does because we didn't, we didn't ask. And then another layer on top of that, we would be working with a bond counsel, which would be a specific to school bonds attorney. So we had, we've used a firm before that was very, we were very happy with our current facility attorney. They also offer those services, but we had success with working with and the responsiveness of our prior bond attorney who becomes very highly rated. But I think that was we could have those conversations outside of the
Okay, so that would yet to be determined. We do work with the registrar of voters and then have an underwriter who oversees the entire process. So when we go to the event timeline, this is the information that Jenny had passed out about the prior measure. And we could put this on a forward facing landscape. There aren't dates specific, but there are a range of dates that we could filter some of these action items in, but this does capture all of the event items that were in the last bond campaign, and then how we would apply them moving forward to see the feasibility of time frame. Do we have enough time to actually go forward for a measure? So I wanted to give you some scope and sequence of those events and how they would phase out throughout the coming months. So that is just the information you have in front of you to bring you up to date as to the work that we have done on the district level to prepare you, the board, for such a decision.
So that, if I'm understanding this, then we still need to hire a facility master planning consultant.
That would be correct. And so we do have those interviews next week. There are 2 different candidates that could help us with that endeavor.
That seems to be really important to know exactly what we need. Did I see someone? So what questions or comments do you have?
At what point in this timeline do we have the no-go decision? Or go, I mean, at what point is there a green light needed or an orange light? Where do we end up making that recommendation or not?
It's usually between the summer before the election. So we would pick that date of when we are full stop, go, no go. And then there's also a date in here, it's around the August timeframe if you're going for a November election. And again, it depends on what election you're actually going for. If you're going for the November election, it would be around August where you could back out of that decision. So there is a safety net or fail stop built in. After August, the bond measure would hold until the election date that you signify.
So as far as the survey that we're looking at that hasn't been implemented yet, we'll get feedback from the community and then evaluate that feedback and then determine whether that's, and I'm wondering where in this timeline is that point?
First of all, we have to determine when the survey is going to go out. Then there's a normal period for how long the survey runs. Once they can compile the results and get it back to us, then we would be presenting that data to the board. And it comes in a report format. So you would have, they do the complete analysis of all the survey questions. And then in that, you could go through that report and digest it as a board and see, are we likely? Is it good of a prospect? Is it an absolute no-go? Like you will kind of get some sort of feel. Sometimes they're right down the middle and you're like, I don't know. But you will get a complete report done as soon as that report comes back after that analysis is done, and then you would bring that to the board at a meeting.
It does look like there are 2 items on here that are similar. One would be number 18, approve and distribute public survey for feasibility study, which would potentially happen now between now and June. But then in September, number 22, approve public survey for feasibility study. So I'm wondering the best time to actually get the survey out. Is it in June or is it in the fall? Almost seems better.
So one is the approve to distribute. So once we get the final survey and we put it on a board agenda, you can approve us to distribute that. Then we would distribute that from my office. And then the other one, once they come together with that report, then you get to read the report. We would present it at a board meeting and you would get to read the actual report. But we are giving you the preliminary, this is the finalized survey after our meeting this week. And this would be what the board would consider and approve going forward and going out from the district office. And that approval would come on, maybe not the next board agenda because it's a workshop, but the next regular agenda.
Where do we actually come up with the number that we think that we need to actually put on for a bond?
I can just add real quick, as soon as we okay the prompts, the survey will begin. So by approving this contract, you've already approved the survey to take place. So we just need to approve from a cabinet level. It doesn't need board approval for the prompts. Then we'll have that piece of data. Then after analyzing that, do we want to go out for more surveys? Do we want to do our own? Do we want to do informal surveys? And I wasn't sure what I heard, so I wasn't sure if moving forward with this actual survey, that's already happened when you approved this contract.
Right.
So he's just waiting for us, and this is all like new this week, to tell him we're okay with the message about this.
Jordan,
Bill, it looks like we would make that decision in phase 5 with the first draft of the bond resolution and tax statement, and then we make any final drafts in phase 6, number 29 and 33 respectively. I assume it would be impacted probably based on the survey results of what the community feels and what we feel in talking with the community they would be most comfortable with.
And the bond statement that Jordan's referring to really needs to be written by an attorney. So. And that's when we would sign on bond council.
other comments? This is our time to discuss, so.
I just want to get the survey done to find out if we're even moving forward. So once we get the results, then we can have further discussion about go, no go.
I agree. It seems like we can't really have any discussion that's gonna pertain to anything unless we move
Get
forward with
that
this.
survey. See what they're willing to tolerate.
I think this was
Too many lights on.
I think this is wonderfully drafted. I really think it's a great start, and I love that we have kind of a jump on this. So I think it's, yeah, I look forward to re-examining a bond again and seeing. I think based on this already, I think we have a much better start than we did with Measure A. So I'm looking forward to what those results are, but I think the plan and what's preliminarily put together looks really good.
And I think what's going to come out of the studies of what's really needed is what's going to really communicate to the community. I also want to just keep in front of us all a concern that I have, and I think others share, that we have a community of people, some of whom are on very fixed incomes, and any increase in their taxes is going to be really hard for them. And I'm not saying don't go for it. I'm just saying we have to remember them as we're putting together our numbers and say, how do we deal with the needs of our schools, which are significant, but also be sensitive to the people in our community and their needs. And it's just keep it there, keep it in front of us. Any further comments? You need anything else from us?
No, we don't.
Thank you again for all the work there.
Yeah, thank you.
Which brings us to a related subject, point 3, and that is school site roof conditions. Jenny Haberman, Chief Business Official.
Okay, this is not a PowerPoint. This is just a handout as we were going to discuss.
Microphone, Jenny, please.
Sorry.
It's okay, sorry.
This isn't a PowerPoint, this is just a discussion for us at the table. So, and because he's still in the room and he loves it when we talk about him, thank you, Jim, for helping me to put this together, I appreciate it. So, we this had a lot of discussion when we, during the snowstorms and during the rains and prior to that, about where are we at with our roofing projects. And the need. So I think that we talked many times for many years that the school district has more need than probably any bond could pass. That we have aging facilities, and there's, we are just a high need in our community, high need facilities we have. So just there, that all is just I have the joys of being a small school district. But right now we have, we really need, all of our school sites need a complete roof replacement. And there's current Band-Aids that we're working on, really though at only one school site, and that's Rhode Island. So we have Band-Aids that were scheduled prior to the snowstorms due to, especially with the rains that we had, so that are now being rescheduled. So we had some Band-Aids that were going to be placed on their high prior to the storm. We did a couple, I think, smaller projects, but then life has been delayed a little bit due to the closures. So right now, those are in the works of being rescheduled. But we don't have any current Band-Aids for the rest of the school sites. We do though for at the maintenance and bus yard, where we have one building that's scheduled for re-roofing, utilizing just our regular routine and maintenance fund because it's under $20,000. And because it's a small building, that's a whole new roof. And that's I think Jim's offices and where their meeting room and where his secretary is. So at other buildings such as like we have our private grounds building that now is offsite storage, things like that with metal roofs. Those would be considered in a whole roofing project and not, we would piece those out to an individual roof. So what funding do we have available for this need? We have 0 available in the general fund. We do have the two set asides in reserve that we talked about at other meetings before with the insurance proceeds from Grandview when Grandview had some damage done where we got bought out of that claim. And we have our prior Fund 14 sweep that was done years and years ago when we were able to have that flexibility. We didn't utilize it. It's just been sitting there in reserve. That total is just over $1.2 million. State funding, we are limited to a certain amount of modernization funds for every 20 years. So every 20 years, the school district is allowed a certain amount of modernization funds. Knowing how much of that we've already tapped into has been really hard for me to get that number. And so even asking some of our partners in construction, I need a number, especially when we're going out for, we might go out for a bond, what we can leverage and what we can match for state projects will be important, important information. So I did talk to someone picked up the phone. It was lovely. I talked to someone at the OPSC, which is the Office of School Construction in Sacramento. And she said, boy, you're the second person this week who's called and asked that question. And they used to have it on their website. They used to maintain on for every school district what their and keep track of their 20-year. Because really some of us would have, I happen to be there now more than 20 years, but I wasn't in my position. It's not like we have a file that has said every time we tapped into state facility dollars. So but she said that she's going to try to call me back tomorrow actually and give me those numbers. She said prior to COVID, they maintained the database and they were able to pull that information for school districts and they've stopped doing that. And because of just workload shortages and just kind of like during COVID, and he said that she's going to have a meeting because he knows it's valuable to school districts. So modernization though, isn't the immediate answer for re-roofing, but it would give us a dollar amount that we could, if we had some matching funds or go out for a bond, we would be able to tap into how much we can leverage with matching state dollars. And there is through the Office of School Construction, there's hardship funds. Now hardship funds would be if we, if our entire roof collapsed, but it does not cover the a project that's needed just because of a structure that's ran its useful life or deferred maintenance. And needing new roofs is not considered, an emergency as it's stated in the hardship language. So we can't tap into those dollars. So disaster relief, there's none at this time. Financing is a question mark, and I'll go over that in another slide. And then of course, proceeds from sale of property could be identified as funds for roofing projects. Excuse me. So estimated costs. We've only received one formal bid to re-roof Rim High, and that's because we have not gone out to bid. We have not developed a scope. That's a lot of work to ask a contractor to just come up and say, oh, help us develop a project that we might not do. So these are from prior knowledge, from prior history, from lots of conversations with our construction partners and Jim. And Rim High, we've actually gotten a quote for a Weatherwell 40-year roofing on all buildings on the campus. And that was $2.1 million. the quotes, not new, I mean, I think it's about 6 months old or so. So that just tells you what one campus would cost. There's an alternative material, which is what our existing roofs are composed of, and that's a Henry's roofing system. But that's a 30-year warranty, but it requires a 10-year cert every 10 years to maintain that 30-year warranty. And so, it would be, we're estimating RIM high would be 1.5 million plus, but then an additional dollar amount each of the 10 years to get to the 10-year cert. For our other sites, we have not received any formal quotes, but we going through what prior roofing projects and just kept, conversation with our partners is what I listed there, what approximately we would want to have in the back of our head, how much a re-roofing project at Barry Putnam, Hank Mountain, Charles Hoffman, Lake Arrowhead, and Valley of Chapman. And you can see there, 1 million plus, Mountain High, 200,000 plus, Charles Hoffman, Lake Arrowhead, and Valley of Chapman. And then plus each 10-year cert district-wide would be about a $500,000 investment. So this is assuming that we know taking off a roof that hasn't been looked at for a while, there's probably damage underneath it. But, these estimates are also, what we would need to understand, this is not knowing the condition of the underneath the roofing zone. So it could be higher. Could be lower, could be higher. Not gonna be all pessimistic. Okay, so financing options. We just want to be able to give more of a, we're not here to ask for direction to pursue this. But we wanted, because we've had conversations in the past where, what if we don't have a bond? What if we never go for a bond? What can we do within our own means? So we wanted to say, what would happen if we wanted to finance these projects? And I have amortization schedules I could provide where I got these numbers. But what the process for financing would be, we would issue an RFP, which is a request for proposal for financing, like you would do a construction project. We would have to file with the county office due to issuing non-voter approved debt. They then file with the auditor controller's office because we are taking on debt as a public entity. We would then select a vendor, process loan, and begin projects, just like you would if you got a personal loan at that point or a company loan. So I wanted to let you know, like, what would sample debt service payments be? And so a loan of $2.5 million at 20 years, 4.5% interest rate, we would be looking at a monthly payment of $15,816.23 roughly, and then roughly about $190,000 annually. I wanted to share that with you because if we moved in that direction, that would be what we would have to add into our multi-year projections on the general fund. Okay, and then you could, and this would be, we would need to get the advice from a bond counsel to kind of into our prior conversation, writing reimbursement for this if a bond passes, is something you can do also, but that would have to be written specifically in the bond language. And, I can't speak to what that wording would be. We would get that from legal advice.
Would taking out a loan like this affect our credit viability? I'm gonna like, there would be, a credit score, I don't know how.
So if we go out for a bond, we will have to get a credit rating. And in our history, when we refinanced the bonds and when we refinanced Measure W and when we went out for Measure A, we had the credit rating, the highest credit rating the school district could get. So we've done very, very well with our credit rating. This would play into that, but it would, if we still were able to maintain positive cash flows and a positive ending fund balance with this debt assumed, then I wouldn't see why that would hurt our credit rating. Because with schools, when you're working with Standard & Poor's, they're looking for a board and district leadership's responsibility level on maintaining financial policy, fiscal policy. That plays a lot into it, because we're really, when we went through this before, there's that producing evidence that we are maintaining a positive financial position. There's no letters of concern from the county. We have positive cash flow, even with the debt in there. So if we were still doing that, I wouldn't anticipate it hurting our credit study moving forward for a bond.
So at this point, I know it's been raining in the high school at times this school year, and that's happened in prior years as well. How much are we paying for our Band-Aid approach currently, like on a per annual basis, approximately, you know, just numbers?
On regular work orders, I don't have that information with me, but we have, like, what's being scheduled is about a $30,000 project. So just that Band-Aid that we're going to be putting on, you know, here in a couple weeks or couple weeks, you know, a couple months. Okay, you know, that in one shot, that's $30,000.
Does that include our labor costs?
Yes, that's not our employees.
With a 40-year roof, would we also still have to do continual maintenance on it? Will it be?
We don't need to do the research at all because it's a different type of material, but what the annual maintenance is, I'd have to put Jim on the spot and ask him what the annual maintenance outlook would be.
I don't know what that is yet, because we haven't looked that deep into the weather well system. It's like a rubberized material. What's the entire room?
Is it, I have to ask you, is it rated for high winds?
Could I ask everybody to use microphones, including Jim, if you don't mind?
Sorry,
Because we are online and people can't hear.
sorry.
Thank you, everyone.
I remember back when we got the sign on the front of the school and they said it was, you know, high wind rated and that thing tore down a couple years later. So, you know, a certificate of guarantee is not that good sometimes.
You want to repeat what you said previously, Jim?
Well, the weather weld system is a rubberized coating that goes over the entire campus. The only downfall of it, it's white. So I'm waiting for pictures to see what that would look like on our roofs. But it has the longest warranty.
Yeah, why would that be a bad thing if it's white?
It's white.
It's white,
It's dirty.
just personal. So I would have to
Yeah.
ask and make sure that
Also reflects
somebody,
heat.
yes, it would.
But are there issues with walking on that if you're up
No.
there? Okay, so if you were needing to clear snow off, you wouldn't damage it?
No,
Slip line?
no, they put a slip resistant material into it because of our snow. To make sure the snow wouldn't slip off and go down in ice.
What does the 40-year mean?
Means that they will protect if you have leaks during those 40 years, they will come out and take care of any leaks that happen in those 40 years.
And Jim, I believe the 10-year cert, within each 10 years, we would have that same warranty for the
Yeah.
Henrys. So we would have a warranty for 10 years, but that warranty wouldn't continue unless we recertified it, and then we have another warranty for 10 years.
Correct.
We recertify it, another warranty for 10 years, that's the third, have a 30-year.
And there's probably a charge to the research.
Oh, it's expensive, yes.
And that research doesn't include any reapplication of Henry?
Yes, it does.
It
If
would
there's a spot there's a problem spot, then yes, it's part of the warranty.
take me back because didn't you re-roof the theater just last year or so?
This building,
But also that rim, you did some re-roofing.
well, we did the gymnasium, the blew off.
And would you then put either one of these materials over that new roof that was put on the
The
gym?
weather weld, you would. The Henrys, if we go back to the Henrys, then we would strip back to the wood and we would build it back up.
And if I'm reading the numbers right here, Jenny, estimating around $5 million approximately. But down here, you put down the possibility of an $8 million loan.
Well, that's including, if you.
That was including the certs, right? That's committed certs.
If we went up to 8 million, if you went up to the 40-year well.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I was like, well, how did I know we came up with that number sitting at my desk? Why did we use it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and that's assuming the high end, yeah.
And would we consider doing some mixture of using the funds like you mentioned in the GBE from Grandview, and even some of the funds from the sale of the district office? And then if we needed to, a loan, so the loan would be much less.
And that's what part of this discussion is about, to get that information for you, so we can start having some, because I think it'll need multiple conversations, especially as escrow closes. We'll know in May what happens with Grandview. You know, we have interested parties at the BOE vacant land. So I mean, so then those, as those discussions happen, that's when we wanted to start the discussion now.
And given the storm, well, given all of the rain in the fall, the Band-Aids that we have put on, especially from high school. And then the snowstorm, which exacerbated some of the repairs that we've already done, opened up new water leak areas, which we now have to replace, I think, with a $30,000 repair that's coming. Understanding the situation, especially at Rim High School, I think that's what brings up probably to the highest priority level of what are we going to do? How are we going to develop a plan to effectively mend our roofs or re-roof Rim High to a quality level where kids and staff can come to school and not have the water filtration that is coming in through that building. It has set off our fire alarms in the middle of the night sometimes. And Brian and I are lucky enough to get those calls. I think you do doing it. And so it is just alarming the amount of cleanup that our crews have to do and the amount of continual maintenance and repair that needs to happen continuously, especially with Rim High. It's not that the other schools are not as important, but I've asked Jenny and Jim really to present and come up with options for the board to consider so that we can really address within our means and try to address within our means the repair of at least one of our schools and then go down the line as we can with the other schools. I do think that we have some money sitting in reserve that we can use. We have the sale of some properties and the utilization of being the good steward of those funds to move forward to try to solve within ourselves some of the issues facility wise that we are, concerned about. I understand that the board also has to weigh in air conditioning and heating and windows and some of those other things too. But I do think that in light of the recent storm, Rim High School's roof structure really has to take a prominent importance level from the Board of Education and us as district leadership to ask ourselves at the very least, what can we do? What are we willing to do? And is it possible to address this structure at least at the foreground?
Scott?
Is it possible to the next time see maybe some samples and how they're applied and what the process is between turning the roof off, inspecting it, and then ending up with your final product?
We have on the governance calendar, and I believe it's in May, we have another facility agenda item, and we could probably have that be part, since we've given a lot of to not just repeat ourselves. We can maybe wrap that into the May meeting.
I'm wondering if staff and or the board needs to prioritize what's most important. Is it roofs? Is it air conditioning? Is it air purification? Is it security on the campuses? And there may be different opinions on what's most important.
Unfortunately, all of it is. I think though that to watch from high school, the hello hallway be under the conditions and then the potential for the M word to come into play. I think that becomes a huge priority. Even it jumps ahead of air conditioning because you cannot have that roof continuously do what it's doing every single season and still be able to have a healthy environment for our teachers and students.
I share your thoughts on that, Cindy, but I don't think we have categorized that as priority. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not sure that staff or the board has put out, here's what our priorities are. Here's what we think is number one. We have an opinion like that, but I don't think we've had taken any position, and I appreciate staff taking a position and probably the board taking a
I
position.
think that in our discussion, we were looking to the master facilities plan to sort of detail all the needs and then do a priority list. That was the discussion prior to the storm. I think that the storm might have, even with the facilities plan, might have changed it so that the roof of Room High School becomes a top priority, but I think though that we were going to wait until that master facilities plan really revealed everything that is needed. Just so we didn't miss anything, because apparently it's everything, but you know, you never know, some hidey hole.
Just to tag on that, the master facility plan will have, not only the structural component or the envisioning of each of the campuses, but it will also go through, community forums, staff forums, student forums, family forums, where they can weigh in and actually prioritize, what some of those items are. And then you will collect that data, or you can collect that data in the report that the master facility plan ultimately produces, along with the blueprints and the envisioning plans. And you get these fly throughs that are kind of neat, videos that can be, made up to see what it would look like when it's done. But it will naturally come through that process. We want to make sure that, I think because of the storm, we are trying to put something forward, even if it's just an awareness format, on behalf of our students and staff who live at Room High School for the majority of their day. So, but then the facility plan will do just that.
I thought that we had a conversation several meetings back where we had prioritized AC work done at Lake Arrowhead Elementary. Now, when the presentation that Snyder made for us, if you remember,
Oh, one of those.
I think we chose windows. We didn't, we chose the option number one, which was replacement of windows at LAE for the 1.6.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But are we moving forward with that project?
Yes.
Yes.
And that one will take up the remainder of our ESSER 3 funds, correct? I think that was what we decided. And COPS, I think was contributing to that.
So with both that presentation of Schneider and today, surprised to see financing options. So what I'm really curious about, because that's, I don't know, I need to get my arms around that. So I'm curious, Jenny and Kim, what you think about actually even considering those, the financing as a possibility.
I think, well, when I asked Jenny to put this presentation together, I think we need to explore all available concerns. I said, especially if we are going to go in front of voters, say we do go forward with a bond, we have got to establish, we have gone through every single possibility to address and handle some of these situations in-house with our own means, being good stewards of ourselves financially. And so if we present all options and we weigh what is feasible for our district to do versus what is not feasible for our district to do, then that becomes one of those talking points, if you will, to say we have exhausted all measures, we have looked at all possibilities, we have presented all options to handle some of these situations that are presenting difficulty for our students and our staff on a regular basis, and things that we know that we need to address. And so that's why you're going to see some of the financing options. Either how can we piece it together with the funds that we have currently and then be fiscally responsible for that? And then how do we, okay, if the project extends beyond that, and we know for the health and welfare and safety of our students and staff that we need to look at these things, what are we willing to consider? Can we consider it or can we not? And then really understand why we cannot if the answer is no. And that's kind of the philosophy behind why Jenny presents a myriad of options, so you, the board, really can make an informed decision based on that.
And I think too, that in that same lane, you know, with the EPA HVAC grant that we went after, you know, which is time consuming on staff to, and, you know, we had Snyder's help, thank goodness. But, you know, to explore all those funding opportunities, which really, when we, with Measure A, even in conversations that we've had here at the board and cabinet level, is have we looked at every opportunity for funding? So we've had, you know, financing would be an opportunity for funding. You know, unfortunately, we did not get the EPA HVAC grant. And so to be able to have that be part of our story, and it's not for a lack of trying, it's not for a lack of being good stewards with our money and fiscally responsible, and we still may need a bond, or we still may need help because we are. So it helps support that argument. There's another EPA grant for buses that just opened up. So, you know, we didn't get the last one of that either, but we're, you know, we talked about it this week. We're gonna try again, because that adds to our story that we're not just waiting to say community give us the money either. We are making efforts to go after some of these dollars, and unfortunately, you know, we're super excited with the cops money so that we got, that was a feel good, you know, but then we know we're going to not get every grant that we go out for either.
I appreciate that, Jenny. For the first grant that you mentioned, that we didn't get, is that the DOE energy grant that we
Yes.
talked about in February?
Yep.
That's too bad.
Jim and Jenny, both of you, thank you. We appreciate the fact that you do things to try to get funds like that, that you put plans together, try to do that. You're putting Band-Aids on, you're trying to keep things going. We appreciate what our staff's doing. Thank you. Anything else?
Appreciate you being out here, Jim. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you. Ten discussion action calendar. 10.1, educational services recommends that the Board of Trustees contract between Rim of the World Unified School District and Imagine Learning to provide the Edgenuity for the 2023-2024 school year. Educational Services recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the contract between Rim of the World Unified School District and Imagine Learning to provide the Edgenuity. I'm saying that right? The Edgenuity platform for Rim Virtual Academy, Mountain High School, and Rim High School Credit Recovery, Secondary Summer School, and core instruction for the 2023-2024 school year.
So moved.
Cindy?
Second.
Scott?
Just wanted to note that, I know it's not on our paper here, but I have the agenda in front of me. It has a fiscal impact of $86,000 from COVID learning loss funds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. We actually heard about this at our last meeting from our principal of the room. And Miranda, that was really interesting. And I have to say, I'm pleased that we're using something. Okay, I have to be careful. I'm pleased we're using something different than Odyssey Ware.
Good job for me, because that's fine.
What's that?
Good job for PCing that statement. Let's vote.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Carried unanimously. Educational Services recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the agreement between Rim of the World Unified School District and Code Rev Kids Incorporated to provide an elementary summer coding camp during the summer of 2023.
So moved.
Cindy?
Second.
Scott?
Just noting that this has a, fiscal impact of $70,000 coming from ELOC funds. I'm very pleased to see that we have an item that utilizes ELOC funds. It's, I know it's a hard one to spend on.
Yes.
Jordan, can you do that? Read it out for each one, because I'm not going to turn my computer on.
Okay.
Danny, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think this program looks fantastic. I'm really excited by it. So thank you for putting in this into the works, Heather. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Carried unanimously. Business Services Resolution number 222316, ratification and approval of purchase agreement 27315 North Bay Road, Blue Jay, California 92317.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And does anyone want to speak to what that motion is about? Debbie?
I just wanted to add that after print of the agenda, there was the exhibit B and C that were referenced in the resolution that we obtained today, and they're not only here on the premises for for anyone in the audience who would like to pick one up and read them, but they were also included online on the online agenda. So if anyone ever wanted to read them, it's their entirety.
Jordan, is there a fiscal impact, please?
There is not one listed on this agenda item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan.
But Jenny, would you please review the sale amount of for the property?
What's that? Hold on.
I'd like to quickly
Probably
just
have
say
one.
that
Okay.
I appreciated last week when everybody came and spoke and expressed their opinions, and we took them to heart, and we really did hear them. And unfortunately, at this time, we're kind of in a bind where we're at, but we did listen, and we appreciate everybody that came and spoke.
The final sales price was $2,925,000 even. And which is lower than the initial sales price, but there was also some credits within escrow with lower commissions and whatnot that are making up some of that difference because of some of the unanticipated timing of escrow, and with some of the title issues that we've had to face, it became more of a we had to kind of even some things out with the buyer, which I think everyone did a good job working together and throwing some compromises in. So that worked out, and we got except for maybe some housekeeping duties. I even got a text from our attorney since we've been up here. So and we've had title accept all of our documentation for the exceptions to title, with the housekeeping items that will just be with as we close the transaction.
Jenny, without trying to overtax your memory, would you mind just reviewing the process we've gone through for the sale of this property?
Where do I start?
I was just gonna say, I in preparation, wrote down a little bit of a timeline, if that might be helpful.
Maybe a tag team, because it starts way back, I believe, in 2017 with our SPAC committee, which is our strategic planning
Yes.
advisory council, which we enlisted. It's the kind of nickname is a 7-11 committee. So when a school district sells real property, it's best practice to have a 7-11 committee, which is made up of a certain per government code, which is made up of a certain number of members. That it's called, nicknamed the 7-11 committee, because the goal is to have no less than 7, but no more than 11 members on a committee to make it efficient. Can we even get up to 5 sometimes in a small school district? So I think no, but so the committee met on several occasions and made the ultimate recommendation to the board of trustees to surplus the property and sell it. So I'm going more or less.
They had a strategy for all of our properties, right? I mean, that came out of that committee.
Yes, the same committee gave a recommendation for the former district office in Blue Jay, Grandview Elementary, I won't cry, and the vacant land adjacent to Valley of Enchantment Elementary.
Jordan, you want to add in?
Sure, yeah, so starting with that, in the late 2010s, is when we started this public process, as Jenny had mentioned, that committee is made up of stakeholders within our community, including employees. We ultimately took that recommendation and surplus that property, which was reported on the local newspapers. We then put the district property up for sale. Technically, that happened in July 2020, but we received all of our bids and proposals, which was reported on the newspapers as well, in October of 2021. We selected our first buyer for that property in November of 2021. That was Sky Park for $2.448 million. In March of 2022, in that time period, it didn't work out with Sky Park, and we had to go back to our original 5 bids that we got, and we selected a higher bid. It was initially for 3.2 million, like Jenny mentioned, and that was amended in April down to that 2.9 figure. And sorry, that was in March of 2022. So November 2021, that was Sky Park. March 2022, last year, we switched to Fifth Street Development, and we entered into a purchase and sale agreement in May of 2022. And that brings us here to where we are today with this amendment.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Jenny. I thought it would be helpful for anyone who's listening or in our community, especially because people with legitimate concerns were here at our last meeting. Thank you, Scott, for recognizing that. And it's helpful that for the community to just be reminded, here's what has been done and why, and the process that's been accomplished. And so thank you to Ward and to all who have been involved from that committee, the community members, and all that we've driven down the way.
I just do want to add that we learned a lot of title issues were involved, amazing, crazy title issues that had Jenny searching through files that were in, lost recesses of the district, trying to, non-digital, and just craziness in terms of having over 30 different title issues. So the fact that we have gotten here has been such a Herculean effort. So just thank you, Jenny.
Point of order, did I call for a motion already?
Yeah, we're already done. We're discussing.
Discussing, yeah.
All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you again to all involved. And now the consent calendar. Number 11, items pulled for separate votes and discussion are to be taken into consideration during agenda item 12.0. Do we have any items that want to be removed?
We already amended the personnel services page already, right? So we don't have to.
Yes.
Anything. Just making sure. Thank you.
So any removal? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I make that motion.
Second. Motion by Cindy, second by Scott. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Carried unanimously. Future meeting dates, board meeting workshop. Guess what, kids? We're meeting again next week. May 4th, 2023 at 4 p.m. Rim of the World Unified School District, Lake Gregory Education Center, 24740, San Moritz Way, Crestline, California, 92325. And we have a regular board meeting on May 25, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. Rim of the World Unified School District, Lake Gregory Education Center, 24740, San Moritz Way, Crestline, California, 92325. We do not need to recess to close session.